fans, it's your boy Luke here for our DFS fades and sleepers for this week's RBC Canadian Open. It's a little bit later in the week. We've had ownership mature. We have a good idea of who's going to be popular and who the low-owned gems are going to be. So in this video, we'll be talking about the most overhyped and overlooked plays of the week, my sleeper picks and my fades that are taking game theory into consideration and giving you more of the strategy side of DFS. Not only are these fades going to be highly owned plays, but are also plays that I expect to maybe falter this week or not be quite as highly projected as others in the industry are saying. And of course, with our sleeper picks, some of the diamonds in the rough that aren't getting quite enough attention and could be nice sources of leverage in your GPP pools. So with a ton to talk about, let's go ahead and start this off with our fades of the week. All right, we've got our projections up, and the first fade we'll touch on is going to be Cameron Smith at $10,300. And Mr. Mulletman is somebody I'm usually supporting here on the channel with his putting, with his approach play that has been unbelievable over the last few months, has been somebody we're riding the hot hand with. But last week, a core pick for us looked great through 3 rounds. On Sunday, completely fell apart. The driving accuracy went from just above average to among the worst on the field on Sunday, and then around the green play, which was keeping him in the event through 3 rounds, where he gained over 6 strokes to the field, fell apart on Sunday, and it's not a surprise that he shot in the upper 70s. So with that negative momentum, I am slightly worried about that bleeding into his play this week, as he usually takes time off after events. He's somebody who will play once, usually take a week off, then tee it up the week after. For him to tee it up multiple weeks in a row and likely next week also at the US Open is a little bit concerning to me. So I wonder about how invested he is into this tournament, and given that the Live Golf event is, starting this week, there's a little bit of competition there. Maybe he was incentivized to play this week. I don't want to speculate too much, but given his track record of usually resting before majors, it is at least a little bit of an eye-opener to me. So going to be a fade. I'm worried about the driving accuracy, but even more than that, I'm also worried about his shots gained putting on bent. On bent grass, it is his worst surface. He's about 0.2 of a stroke worse per round on bent grass than he is on other surfaces. And given that the off the tee play has been as hairy as it's been over his last 24 measured rounds, going to be a reason to fade, because up top, outside of Cam Smith, absolutely love JT this week. Scotty Scheffler and Rory McIlroy, you can make very compelling arguments for either player. And even some of the guys in the top of the 9K, like a Shane Lowry, like a Matt Fitzpatrick, HV3, which we'll be talking about a little bit later on, are all guys that I'm a little bit more confident getting to with their recent form, and of course from the skill set perspective, which is really where they differentiate themselves. So at 22.7% ownership, he's going to be one of the studs up top that I will be fading this week, mostly due to the fact that he's not so accurate off the tee. Next up, we have Sam Burns at an even $10,000. And if you're looking at putting splits on bent grass, another player that draws that red flag. In fact, a huge red flag where he's over a half a stroke worse per round on bent grass than any other surface. That's just the start of the problems for Burns, where he's not the best around the green player. He's somebody who's obviously explosive with his off the tee play and can be with the approach play from time to time. When he brings that approach play is when he wins golf tournaments. But I worry about the putting splits, and then I worry about the around the green play, which even of late, when he's playing unbelievable golf, has had multiple top 25s, the win, of course, at the Colonial. He's a loser to the field around the green. And the larger sample size that you give Sam Burns, it's still going to be right around a neutral no matter when you look at it. And the further back you go, the worse and worse it gets. So even though it hasn't been a huge problem of late, we also haven't had that many tests for him, right? If you take a look at the recent form, the tracks where he's had the least amount of success, Byron Nelson, it's actually a relatively easy golf course, so that might be a little bit surprising. But the Masters, not a surprise that he had a little bit of trouble around that venue. 20th at the PGA, that's not all that good for Sam Burns, right? A top 20 finish for a 10K option isn't really going to get it done. It's golf courses that are positional and a little bit tougher than most. When courses are a little bit easier, obviously, i.e., what he saw there at Desert Classic. That was an easy golf course at TPC Louisiana, finished in second place. Going back to the Sanderson Farms, which he won. Valspar Championship, well, I wouldn't say it's an easy golf course. It's easier than what we had at the Wells Fargo, and certainly easier than what we had at the PGA Championship. So I'd much rather prefer him at these middle tier tracks or easier tracks on the PGA Tour. When things get a little bit more difficult, when you're going to be missing 7 to 8 greens per round, he's not really my favorite target to get to. And of course, he's going to be highly owned coming in off the win. And if we're going to need another tiebreaker or another reason to fade him this week, the numbers on Bentgrass aren't ideal either. So just somebody that I will be fading up top, particularly when I like Shane Lowry and Matt Fitzpatrick as much as I do this week. And the last fade we'll get to here is going to be Tony Fenow at $9,400. And Tony has been much better of late than he has all season, so I was considering playing him, just not at 20% ownership, right? He's 20.2% owned. The recent form, like I said, has been consistent. That's why people are starting to come around on Tony. He had the top 5 at the Charles Schwab, second at the Mexico Open, a few middling performances, which is really what I'm concerned about here. So the performances at the Charles Schwab, at the Mexico Open are great. Mexico Open, we kind of would expect him to have success. That was all about off the tee play. I mean, Jon Rahm won. I mean, second place, Tony Finau, right? It'd make a lot of sense that was about the driver. The Charles Schwab, though, that was a great performance. But at the Charles Schwab, he's always had success, which for his skill set is rare. We knew that going into the week. That's why we played him last time out. But that was not something that we would expect from a skill set perspective, because at the PGA Championship, another positional course, 30th, right? Not all that good. 41st at the Wells Fargo, another positional golf course. At the Masters, 35th. Valero, 29th. So at these courses where you have to be accurate off the tee, he's kind of struggled outside of the Charles Schwab. So do we look into that one event sample size and expect him to continue that this week, or to revert back to the form that we've seen most of his career at these positional courses, which isn't all that good? And I'd side with the latter, of course. I'm all about large sample sizes when it comes to DFS. And much like Sam Burns, much like Cameron Smith, also deals with issues on bent grass. Is right around 0.2 of a stroke worse per round on bent grass than any other surface. So given the recent form on comp courses hasn't been all that good, he's a little bit more popular than I think he should be. He's going to be a fade in my DFS lineups for this week. And now that we've gone through the fades, the guys that we're avoiding, let's talk about the guys we expect to play well, right? The more exciting picks this week. Where we're going to start off with HV3, Harold Varner III at $9,700. And he is always a target for me at positional golf courses. He's not somebody who's going to overpower a venue with his power off the tee, his brawn or anything like that, but somebody who's extremely well-rounded, will gain across all 4 categories from time to time on tour. And depending on when you catch him, he will gain across all 4 categories. So if we take a look at his last 24 rounds, you can see that's not the case of late off the tee. It's been a little bit worse than usual, where he's a just marginal loser, right around 1/10 of a stroke per round. But approach has been great, gaining close to a stroke per round. Around the green and putter has been pretty solid of late. And the one thing that, like I said, is he doesn't overpower golf courses, but he sure hits a lot of fairways, particularly when he's playing his best golf. Just take a look at his round at the Wyndham Championship. Nearly shot 59. He's been first round leader at a few other courses in the Carolinas, which is where he's from. But more importantly, usually those golf courses are par 70s, par 71s, right around 71, 7,200 yards. Very similar to what we're getting here at St. George's. So I like the fact that he's had success at some of the comp courses I'm looking at. The recent form for HV3 is starting to get there. A few made cuts in a row. He has 2 top 5s at the Zurich and the RBC Heritage. And of course the Heritage, a very similar venue to what we're going to have this week. So hopefully he can channel some of that energy that he had over there at Harbour Town. He can go out there and finish with another top 5. Next up, we have Sebastian Munoz at $9,200. And usually Munoz, I like at Birdie Fest. I like him at courses where we're going to expect it to be relatively easy. But of late, Munoz is showing us a completely different side of his game. A well-rounded game that is honestly pretty scary for the rest of the tour. Because if Sebastian Munoz, we know he's a striper. We know his ball striking stats, approach and off the tee are going to be unbelievable. Probably over 1/3 of a stroke per round for pretty much no matter when you look at his recent form. But around the green and the putter are starting to become positives for him. And if he's going to be consistent with the short game, I mean, this is a top 30 player in the world. Legitimately, he has that type of upside with his birdie making. Of late, that's carried him to quite the performances. You can see, first off, a bunch of made cuts. He has the top 5 finish at the Byron Nelson, which was a birdie fest. Like I said, we usually like to target him here, but you're talking about a relatively weak field. You're talking about nobody wanting to own him because of this narrative around him. If we get him even close to 10% owned this week, you can see I have him at 12% right now, and that's only lowering as I update this day by day. I'm going to be all over the guy because in this type of field, if he goes out there and has what would be like a top 20 finish at other events, that could be a top 5 or a top 10 at this field. That's how weak it is outside of the top 4 to 5 players. So at $9,200, I love the upside. He certainly has a low floor, but in these large field GPPs, I'm willing to take on that type of risk. Next up and lastly, we have Keith Mitchell, and at $9,000, he's a just very similar play to a Sebastian Munoz where he has the upside we're looking for. He's maybe not the best course fit. He's better at longer courses, like the Wells Fargo Championship there at Quail Hollow where you got to hit some long irons. This course maybe not long from the distance perspective, particularly off the tee, but you're going to have to hit a lot of 200-plus yard shots. All 5 par 3s are over 200 yards. The 3 par 5s, you're obviously going to have long iron in hand. For guys like a Keith Mitchell, I think he's a little bit of a sleeper pick here. And same thing for Sebastian Munoz. The one thing he's kind of known for is that long iron play. So just because they're bombers, they get that knack for playing well at easy birdie fests. Don't ignore those type of guys this week because they have the firepower to take this place low. And if they're hitting fairways this week, and that's really what it's going to come down to, right? Both of them long off the tee but can deal with issues with their accuracy. If they can have a ceiling week with their accuracy off the tee, watch out. Both of these guys very alive to win this event. So I'm going to have a ton of exposure to both of them, probably something in that 30 to 35% range in all of my GPP lines. That's all I've got for the DFS fades and sleepers. Before you hop on out of here, let me know who you're fading this week and, of course, who your biggest sleeper pick is. I always love to hear from you, so make sure you comment that down below. And as per usual, we'll have our DFS live stream Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. There will be touching on the weather for this week, my player poll, any adjustments to my modeling I've made throughout the week, any of your live questions, ownership, strategy, everything you're going to need to know for this week. So make sure to set a reminder for that. Again, that is tomorrow night at 7 p.m. And best of luck with all of your lineups. Make sure you smash the like button before you hop on out of here as well. And I'll see you guys next time.